have another spooky story for you guys. This one was submitted by a woman who believes that she ran into what seemed like two small children while she was traveling home with her family late at night. But to this day, she's not exactly sure what approached her that night. Let's just get right into the story. My husband, son, and I were on our way home from a week-long vacation. Our son had fallen asleep in the back seat about an hour earlier, and my husband suggested we stop at the next rest area so he could stretch his legs and grab some coffee. It was late, well past midnight, and the highway was kind of creepy. It had thinned out to long, empty stretches of road. Thankfully, the rest stop was still open, but barely. Only a few cars were parked under the dim lights, and the building itself looked old and decrepit, like it hadn't been updated in decades. As soon as we pulled in, I felt the low-level discomfort that comes with stopping somewhere unfamiliar at night, but nothing alarming enough to mention. My husband went inside, leaving me in the car with our son while I checked my phone and waited. Everything was quiet until our son suddenly sat straight up in his car seat and started crying. I assumed he'd had a bad dream. He was 6 at the time and still prone to waking up confused in unfamiliar places. So I unbuckled myself and turned around to try and soothe him. But this wasn't the groggy, half-asleep crying that I was used to. He was wide awake, shaking and sobbing in a way that I had never seen before. His little hands clenched tight around the straps of his car seat. When I asked him what was wrong, he didn't answer. He just kept crying harder, gasping for breath like he couldn't calm himself down, no matter how much I tried to soothe him. After several minutes, I noticed movement near the edge of the parking lot. 2 children were standing near the tree line, just beyond the reach of lights. They looked to be about 10 or 11 years old, and they were dressed in dark clothes that blended almost entirely with the shadows. I thought they might be siblings who were just waiting around for their parents, but something about the way they stood still caught my attention. They weren't talking to each other, weren't shifting their weight or fidgeting the way kids normally do. They just stood there, facing our car. My son's crying escalated the moment I looked at them. He started screaming, his voice full of panic, kicking his legs and begging me to leave. I tried to calm him while telling myself not to overreact. But the closer the children drifted towards us, the harder it was to ignore the feeling that was pooling in my stomach. They approached slowly, stopping just outside the circle of light cast by our headlights. I cracked my window open slightly so I could ask if they needed help. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a voice that was flat and strangely formal for a child. "Can you help us?" he asked. "We need a ride." I felt nauseous almost instantly, like the air inside the car had thickened. I asked where their parents were, already reaching for the door locks without thinking. The other child tilted her head slightly and said they were close by, but didn't point or elaborate. My son was hysterical now, screaming into his seat and clawing at his straps. His face was red and wet with tears. He had turned his head away from the children and was inconsolable no matter what I said to him. When I asked what was wrong, he screamed, "Don't let them in. Please, don't let them in." The children took a couple more steps closer, still being careful to avoid the light. One of them started speaking again, more insistently this time, saying it would only be for a moment, that they were cold, that they just needed permission to get inside the car. The word permission sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the cold night air. I noticed then that my nausea had grown into a full-blown headache, with pounding pressure behind my eyes, and my hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't make out what was on my phone screen. Everything in my body was telling me to leave. I tried to rationalize what was happening. These were just kids. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. I didn't want to be the kind of person who ignored children asking for help, but something in me just would not let me open that door. My husband came out of the building, and the moment the door closed behind him, the children stepped back away from the vehicle. They slowly moved further and further away from the car in what seemed like a slow glide. By the time my husband reached the car and asked what was going on, they were gone. Once we were back on the highway, I told my husband what happened. He tried to reassure me by suggesting that our son was just overtired or overwhelmed, and that the kids were probably waiting for their parents somewhere nearby. I nodded along, even though my hands were still shaking and my heart hadn't slowed down yet. However, my nausea and headache had completely subsided. Our son fell asleep almost immediately after we pulled away, as if nothing unusual had just happened. A few days later, after we'd returned home, I brought it up gently while my son and I were sitting together on the couch. I asked him if he remembered the kids we saw at the rest stop, careful not to sound alarmed or suggestive. His face changed the moment I mentioned them. He told me they were scary, and when I asked why, he said it was because of their eyes. I asked him what he meant. So he looked at me very seriously and said, "They were all black." I responded, "What do you mean they were all black?" He put his finger on my eyelid and said, "You have white eyes with green in the middle. They only had black in their eyes. No white." I felt my stomach drop. I asked him how he could tell, since it had been so dark and the children never stepped fully into the light. He shrugged and said he just knew. I didn't push him any further. I didn't want to put ideas in his head or make it worse by asking questions that I wasn't prepared to hear the answers to. But I still think about that moment sometimes, because I never saw their eyes myself. I never even got a clear look at their faces, and yet my son reacted to them with a level of fear that I've never seen before or since, like something in him recognized danger before his mind could understand it. I do want to know what you guys think about this story. Were these actual children looking for help, or were they possibly something else? Tell me your theories down in the comments, and don't forget to follow for the next spooky story.
I feel like we'd all like to think that in our worst moments, someone's watching over us. This is one of those stories that makes you wonder. One of my followers sent in a story about his dad. He was a truck driver for about 37 years, and he'd seen pretty much all there is to see out there on the open road, or so he thought. Specifically, he was a log truck driver in the 80s, and he'd take on any job just to pay the bills. So he got a phone call from the company to deliver a load to Willacoochee, Georgia. It was a simple drop-off and return trip. It shouldn't have taken more than a night to get back. The trip started in Orangeburg, South Carolina, and it went pretty smoothly all the way to Georgia. All he had to do was get there, drop off his trailer that was full of logs, and then head back to South Carolina. He said it was about a 4.5-hour trip one way, and by the time he got there to drop off the logs, it was dark. So on his way back to Orangeburg, he was on all back roads, and that's when his truck started to act up. Unfortunately, he ended up stalling on a railroad track. He got out of the truck and he went to check the engine to see if he could get it up and running and get off the track. Also, the railroad crossing was on a back road, and there were no lights to alert him if a train was coming. There was only a railroad crossing sign. So he's tinkering with the engine, and he actually got it running, and that's just when he heard a train approaching, coming barreling towards him. So he jumps into the truck and tries desperately to get it off the tracks before the train hits. He also said that it was on a blind curve, so it was absolutely the worst case scenario. This train conductor would not even have seen him in enough time to slow down and stop. And that's just what happened. This train smashed into him going 60 miles an hour. He said it crushed the cab around him, and it pushed his truck off an embankment and pushed it 100 or so yards away from the initial impact site. This man was trapped, and he had serious life-threatening injuries because the toolbox that he had sitting in the seat to try to get the truck running had scattered everywhere, and he had screwdrivers piercing both of his knees. So he passes out from the pain, and then he says when he came to, he heard the sound of a woman's voice asking him if he was awake yet. She would also say, "Everything is going to be okay. The ambulance is on the way." He said then he saw her. It was an older black woman standing outside of the wreckage, peering in at him, keeping him calm, and she even called him by name. She kept reassuring him and said, "Marion, you are going to be okay. The ambulance is almost here." He said she stayed with him until he passed out again, and then when he woke up next, he was on the ambulance and they were administering CPR. He said he was in and out of consciousness the whole way back to the hospital. When he arrived, he was obviously in pretty bad shape, and they called his wife and she came flying to the hospital. When she got there, he begged her to please go back and find the woman who stayed with him while they waited for the ambulance. He wanted to thank her for calling the ambulance and saving his life. So she did. She went back to the scene, which is in the middle of nowhere, and started knocking on doors and describing this woman to them, even down to what she was wearing. But nobody had any idea who she was talking about. So while she was out there, she bumped into the ambulance driver because he was out there making the final report at the scene. She asked who the woman was who called the ambulance, and they said that no woman did. It was actually the conductor of the train after he hit the truck. They even said that when the ambulance arrived at the scene, nobody else was there except for the man pinned in the truck, fully wide awake. But his dad swears that this lady was there, and she not only was there calming him, she used his name multiple times trying to reassure him. He also makes note that he did not have a name tag on his shirt, nor had any extra shirts in the wreckage with his name on it, and his ID was still in his wallet, in his back pocket. So there's no way that this woman could know what his name even was. He insists that this woman had to be his guardian angel, sent there to keep him calm so he didn't bleed out or anything while they waited for the ambulance to get there. No one ever did find this woman. No one ever could identify her given the description. It was just a big mystery. Just appeared, did her duty, and then disappeared. He has spent a little over 7 years recovering from this accident, in and out of hospitals from different reoccurring ailments caused by this train crash. And to this day, he will tell you the story about his guardian angel who saved his life. That was a really good one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had an experience where a guardian angel or higher power absolutely helped you out? I'm sure that the person who shared this story with me will definitely be in the comments to see what you have to say. And if you haven't already, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Get comfy and get cozy. It's spooky story time. This next story is from Reddit. The Appalachian Mountains have been all over my feed, and I found one that I wanted to share with you guys. Excuse my voice tonight, I'm a little sick. So here it goes. Hello all. Originally, I'm from West Virginia. I moved between the Appalachian and the Midwest as a kid. Between the ages of 10 through 13, I lived in rural Kentucky, in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and Grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac, in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my Grams had some rules I had to follow at the time. I chuckled them up to be hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like, don't mess around with the wild animals. Don't go into the woods alone. Then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods you might know, no you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my Grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You have animal life, bugs, chattering wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night, we added the campfire to the list. My dad decided to go back up the house about a quarter mile to get more beer and go check on Grams. Before he left, he told me, don't mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet. Like real quiet. The wind had all but stopped. Bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable, even though I'd been left at the campground before like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat, out of nowhere. This awful metal thing. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad. Right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans to the fire. I told him I didn't do it and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in the woods, this dense, is when the lightning hits lights, it lights up everything, like the middle of the day, well up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no street lights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than dim light from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one does in August in the mountains, when the first clap of lightning hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's pitch black again. Next clap of lightning comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road, and the ditches on either side, just past the first line of the trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what it was, so I just kind of stay still. It's just a few moments before the lightning hits again. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back again. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. The thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body, the arms were too long, and the torso didn't fit right. It was like if you asked a blind person to draw what a person looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lightning hit again, the thing is standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My Gramps is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, tell him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad vaguely, drunk obeys. That night I sleep with her. The next day we discover the tent door is torn off. It didn't look like an animal. Things were cut off or shredded, but looked like someone had pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. Heads gone, no blood. It was so scary. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I try to talk about it, I just had the subject changed. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s, and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling the story, my aunt got irritated with me, saying, "Don't you tell them that. Don't you put that evil on them." After, I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it, and how I was shunned. My kid might not realizing it was something as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes into Reddit, I realized there was a name for this fucking thing. The same name my auntie had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goat Man. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Gram's rules. And if you want to record your videos with better sound, you can purchase these little mics here on the TikTok shop. You just connect a little attachment to your phone, turn on your mic just by pushing a little button, and you're all set. And it does come with this fluffy mic cover and a regular one. So if you like the sound of this video and you want to purchase your own, you can look them up here on the TikTok shop, or just push the little orange cart.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. My family has a cabin, well, it's really just an old mobile home, in the middle of the woods in northern Michigan. We've had it for years and years, but only recently some unexplained, odd things have happened, and the police have even been out there to search the place. The last time I went to the cabin was the worst experience. I went up with my friend. For context purposes, we're 2 girls in our late 20s, and we arrived at dark. We got out and unloaded, but had trouble turning on the power. It has an outside electrical box, and the lock was frozen shut. We were trying to get it unstuck, but kept hearing noises around the cabin. Finally, it sounded like the noises were very close to us, and as we weren't getting anywhere with the lock, we rushed inside in case it was a bear milling around. We sat inside for maybe 5 minutes before deciding to drive out to the nearest town to get a motel for the night. We would come back once it was light to get the power on. We grabbed a few things and headed back out to the car. I got in and tried to turn the car on, but nothing happened. The car was 100% unresponsive. The doors wouldn't even lock. My car had absolutely no issues. We had just driven 3 hours to the cabin without any problems. Something had to have happened to the car in the few minutes that we were inside. I told my friend we needed to get back inside. We got to the door and locked up behind us. We looked at each other, suddenly scared. Our car was totally dead. We had absolutely zero cell service and we had no power. We tried to stay calm and we made a new game plan. We were just going to rough it for the night and then, at first light, walk in the direction of civilization until we got cell signal or ran into help. Only a short time later, we were sitting together in the living room, quietly talking. Suddenly, there was 2 sharp, loud knocks on the back door of the cabin. We both absolutely froze. We sat there horrified and shaking, just waiting for someone to push their way into the door or a window. This was a mobile home, so it would take very minimal effort to break in. We were met with only silence, but now we knew someone was outside. What did they want? It was much scarier to think that they hadn't broken in. They just potentially sabotaged our car and were now knocking on our door to toy with us. We sat, silent and terrified. After a while, we started talking again, only to have something bang on a window. Just one loud smack. I've never been so scared. We quickly realized we had to stay alert and awake until morning. We just had to hope that whoever was outside didn't try to get in. They didn't, but a pattern of knocks on the window continued for hours. As soon as the sun was up, we ventured outside. We looked under the hood of my car. It turns out the bolt that clamps the metal piece to the battery terminal was loosened almost completely, and the nut was all the way loosened. 1 or 2 more turns, and they would have fallen off completely. Okay, that story is so scary because obviously somebody was outside of the cabin, and the car was working perfectly fine before, and whoever was outside of the cabin obviously sabotaged their vehicle. But it's weird because they never actually got into the house, and they would have been able to if they tried hard enough. So why didn't they break into the house? Maybe they were just having a lot of fun toying with the girls? I don't know. Some people are weird like that. That is actually one of the stories that's going to be on my podcast that comes out tonight at midnight. I've been posting my podcast to my YouTube channel as well. I just started a YouTube channel, and you can find both of those in my bio.
If you're in the upstate New York area, you might want to listen to this because I haven't heard about this and I think you should hear about it. So there was this lady named Carrie Mazuka that lived in Albany, New York in 1997, and she was 25 at the time, and she had a baby. She didn't want the baby because she didn't know that she was pregnant. So instead of giving the baby up for adoption or going to a hospital, she claims that she had her baby in her bathtub. And come to find out, after being interrogated by the police and getting caught up, 27 years later, she finally confessed that after she had the baby, she smothered the baby and she lit the baby on fire, and she left it by the Moses statue at Washington Park. Please correct me if I'm wrong, okay? She then left the baby there, and that was it. When she was being interrogated by the FBI and all that, she was saying that she gave birth to the baby in her bathtub and that the baby passed away by drowning, which they wasn't having that. They knew it was a lie because a baby is in a sack when you're pregnant, but once you give birth to the baby in water, the baby can breathe underwater until it hits the air. And they knew from the autopsy that the baby did not pass away due to suffocation or due to water being in the lungs. The baby passed away due to being burned. And she was swearing up and down. She was putting it on God. She was saying that she didn't know what happened to the baby. She was saying that she gave the baby to a stranger in the park. She just kept switching her stories up, but they was not letting up. And she didn't even have any remorse when she was being interrogated. She kept calling her baby a it. Pretty sure she ended up finding out the gender once she had the baby. She kept calling it a it. She kept saying that the baby never cried, which we know is a lie. But yeah, in April of 2025, they ended up sentencing her to 25 years in prison. And she did confess to it. She did admit that what she did was horrible. But she claims that she's still a good mother. I don't know how. But yeah, if y'all want a part two with like evidence and the resources that I've seen in the videos of the interrogation room, let me know. This doesn't work, but we're gonna act like it does, okay? We're not gonna say shit because my brother broke it and I just want to use it because it's fucking cute. Get your snacks, get your blankets, turn the lights off, and listen, okay? I'm back with another creepy, scary story time, okay? It might be scary to some of y'all. It might not be. Oh well. But this happened when I was like 14. It was my 14th birthday party. I had a birthday party at a hotel. Okay? It was girls against boys once again. We was playing manhunt because that was my favorite game. Now, just a little backtrack. Every single time I went to a hotel, I played manhunt. And of course, you would think hotels don't want you to play manhunt, but they didn't say anything for the most part. Like, cause my dad would like book hotels just randomly, and I would tell my friends to come, and like we wouldn't have a problem playing manhunt. But this specific hotel that I had threw my birthday party at mentioned that they didn't want any kids playing in the hallways and just being loud and all that. It was a really, really, really nice, high class hotel. So yeah, we're playing manhunt. It's girls against boys. I don't know where the other girls went. I just know that the boys was counting and me and my sister ran off together. Me and my sister are running and we hear footsteps like running in the hallways behind us. Now, there's a door, like an exit door, and like the hallway shits, the hallway staircases. It sounded like it was coming from over there, but when we looked, we didn't see anybody. So it started like getting louder, like if it was getting closer. So me and my sister part ways. I don't know where she went. I just know I hid behind a soda vending machine that was like kind of in the cut. So I'm waiting there for like 10-15 minutes. I'm telling you, I was waiting there for like 10-15 minutes. And I don't hear nobody run by. I didn't even notice that the footsteps stopped. That's the crazy part about it. I didn't notice that the running stopped. So I'm just sitting there and I'm waiting. Nobody's coming by. So I start using my phone because, like I said, I'm in a little cut. I start using my phone to see if I see somebody in the hallway just standing there trying to get me out, because there's no way that you see me run over here and you're not catching me. So I don't see nobody. Okay, cool. I run to the opposite side of the hallway where the other staircase was, and I hear more footsteps running up the fucking steps, and the steps was long. We was like on the 4th floor, so like I'm hearing fast ass running, like heavy ass, loud ass, echoing ass footsteps, because there's nobody else in the hallway of that staircase but me. I go back to my hiding spot. I'm waiting for this person to open the door. Nobody comes once again. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's just somebody from like one of the hotel rooms or somebody that works here watching the cameras and is trying to scare me. Okay. I go find my sister. I still can't find the other girls. Still don't see the other boys. I go find my little sister. We was explaining to each other that the same thing was happening to us even when we went in our separate directions. So we both hearing the same shit, but we not getting caught or seeing anybody. So, like I said, there's a group chat for the boys and there's a group chat for the girls. So I start asking the girls, like, where's y'all at? Because, like, we need to stick together because somebody keep playing with us. And nobody's answering. All of a sudden, the service is not working. in the hotel area that I'm in, which I'm not understanding why, because the hotel that I'm in is like a high class hotel. The Wi-Fi is booming in there, so why am I like running out of service right now? Now me and my sister run to a different floor. We took an elevator. We went to a different floor, and when the elevators open, you heard like running towards the elevator. So I'm like, fuck, shit, we got caught. Yeah, we couldn't go nowhere, and we couldn't close the elevator in time. The elevator doors opened right back up, like if somebody pressed the button, and when we looked, nobody was there. Like I said, it could have been somebody trying to play with us that worked at the hotel, or it could have been somebody that was like in one of the rooms that was noticing it was a whole bunch of kids playing. But yeah, after that, we didn't even get caught. The girls never got caught. My mom ended up telling us, like, yo, y'all been playing manhunt for like a whole hour. Y'all need to come back to the room now, because we don't need y'all getting in trouble. We don't know where half of y'all's at. Y'all not answering y'all phones. So we ended up going back to the hotel room. And I'm explaining to everybody what the fuck is happening. And my sister's explaining it too. And everybody's just like, not paying it no mind for real. They like, oh, we ain't see y'all the whole time. Y'all must have been some good hiders, shit like that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If y'all want more scary stories, definitely let me know.
I heard this story about a house that was completely infested with mimics. Now, it all started off with this family who lived in New York. And they had lived in this big home in a rural area. They, really, for the longest time, like, didn't have anything weird ever happen. Until one night, the wife and husband are, in the living room, and their kids are gone with a family friend. Well, the husband says, I'm going to, leave and I'll be back. I'm going to go to the store. Do you need anything? And his wife says, no, I'm good. I'll see you when you get back. So her husband goes out the front door, gets in his car, and drives off. Right after he pulls out of the driveway, like all of a sudden she hears a noise upstairs. And when she walks upstairs, she sees her husband come out of the closet and just start walking down the hallway. And she's like, honey, like, wait, how'd you get upstairs? Like, you came back home? And he's like, yeah, I'm going back to the car. I'll talk to you later. And so he just like goes downstairs and goes out the front door. So she calls her husband on the cell phone and was like, why'd you come back to the house? Like, that was kind of weird. What were you doing upstairs? And he goes, what are you talking about? Like, I'm far from home. Like, I've been driving for like a little while now. And she's like confused, and she thinks like he's just playing a prank on her. So fast forward to the wife and their two kids are sitting on the couch, and the wife and one of the kids are sitting on the couch, and one of the daughters comes downstairs, and they say, like, hey, what are you doing? You want to come watch a movie with us? And the daughter doesn't say anything. And they're like, hey, aren't you going to respond? Like, what's wrong? And like, the daughter still doesn't say anything. She just keeps walking past them. And she goes into another room. So the sister like follows and is like, says their name and is like, what are you doing? Well, all of a sudden, like, the sister comes back down the stairs again, because she said, I heard you guys calling my name. And they're like, wait, no, you just walked past us into that room. Like, how'd you get upstairs? And she's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've been upstairs in the bathroom. And once again, like, they didn't know how, the wife didn't know what to think of this. So finally, like, the last straw was one night, her husband and her two kids, they had left to go do something, and she's up in her bedroom. She hears like some rustling sound in her closet, and she's like, what is there, like something in my closet? She opens the door, and there's her husband, like, crouched down, holding his knees, like sitting in the closet, kind of like looking really weird, like has this strange look on her face. And she's like, what are you doing in the closet? I thought you were with our daughters. And like, the man just, her husband just says, come in the closet with me. And she's like, what? And he's like, come in here, come in the closet. And She instantly like knew that wasn't her husband, and she ran out the door and calls up her husband and is like, get here right now. And shortly after that, they end up moving.
I have a ghost. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I honestly believe right now that I'm being haunted. So anyone who knows me knows that I travel around the country looking for haunted locations. I go in, I do investigations, I do content, I do the history and the research, because I'm on a mission to find out if ghosts are real. And I believe something has potentially followed me home. So for the past couple of weeks, there's been stuff that's been constantly happening. When I say constantly, I mean it's happening on a daytime and it's also happening at night. And it can range from anything from a bang, a growl, or sounding like someone is walking in the loft. I've also had presents over Christmas. The same pile of presents, ironically, keep flinging themselves over. And then in my office, I've got like greenery here. These keep moving as if someone's playing with them. The presents I actually had piled up here and they flung over. I will insert a video right now. I don't know if I can catch this on camera, but these have like been making a noise. As if they're, oh my Jesus Christ. By the way, that actually happened twice in this office, so I made a point of moving the presents from the office into the bedroom. It happened again in the bedroom, so the next night what I did was I unstacked the presents, laid them all down in a row in the bedroom, and I woke up in the middle of the night to what sounded like somebody opening the presents. I could physically hear somebody playing with the wrapping paper. I've also been waking up in the middle of the night to noises and also growls, like a full-blown growl. And I was sending a voice note to somebody and they heard the growl on the voice note. I also have a second phone, so I'm going to leave this lying around different places, recording different areas. And I spend a lot of time in this room working, so my plan is to set up that second phone and have it continuously recording. So if something does happen or the greenery starts to move behind me or something falls off a shelf, I'm going to catch it. The question is, do you guys want me to start vlogging this daily? I'm actually quite happy just recording for my own personal sake, but if you guys want to see it, I am also happy, very happy to vlog it and post it.
Scary stories that happen in graveyards are the worst, especially the ones with jinns involved, just like the one that I'm about to tell you right now, so be prepared, you're not sleeping tonight. It all started in this country right here, Saudi Arabia, most precisely between these two cities right here, Mecca and Medina. See, between these two cities, there is a road that everybody avoids, okay? And they avoid it for a reason. It's old, there is no light, and there is a graveyard in between. And you guessed it, the story happened in this graveyard, more like cemetery, called the Abwa Cemetery. The story starts with a group of 4 people in a car going through that road. It's important to know that the road looks pretty much like this, dark, empty, and old. So the group is trying to do this fast, okay? They don't want to stay here because it will only cause them problems. But obviously something happened. You see, while they were in the car, one of them heard a voice. So he told the driver to stop and told everybody to listen to see if he's the only one hearing that voice. So when the car stopped and everybody started listening, they heard something. And let me describe to you what they heard. All the group heard Quran recitation. For those who don't know, Quran is the holy book for Muslims, okay? But that's not the problem. The problem is who is doing this out loud in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. That's what the group asked themselves. They were confused, so they decided to follow the voice that's reciting. So they kept following that voice and it led them to this place, a cemetery. This is where the group realized that they were cooked, baked. If you're asking why, well, I need you to focus right now because this is where the story becomes technical. The recitation they are hearing from the graveyard is wrong, like false. Bro, what do you mean? Well, whoever's doing this is using correct verses, okay? The verses he's reciting exist, but the problem is he's making mistakes and he's doing it on purpose. Let me give you an example so you can understand. Let us say that you said a sentence. The sentence is correct, but you, on purpose, added some gibberish words in the middle, so the whole sentence doesn't make sense anymore. Well, that's what happened. So, being confused, the group tried to track the sound to correct whoever is doing this, or at least tell him to stop. And while doing that, the voice they were hearing kept multiplying, like it became multiple voices. Multiple voices reciting some nonsense, making weird noises in the middle of the night in a cemetery. This is where the group realized that it's time to get out. This is not right. So when they got out of here, they made it to the city, and when they made it to the city, they immediately went to see a scholar, and according to that scholar, this is what happened. Group came across jinns in this cemetery, but not any type of them. They came across jinn al-istidraj. Bro, what the hell is this? Let me explain. Istidraj is an Arabic word that means luring somebody, trying to get him closer, and if you think about it, that's exactly what happened to them. Recitations were coming from jinns. It was jinns they were reciting, and they were making mistakes on purpose so other people can be tricked, and when they come to the cemetery, boom, they join the others. These jinns are known for not attacking directly. They do not scream or anything. They just set a trap, and once you step on it, you're done. And at least they make the job easier by slamming you in a cemetery so you can be buried right after. This is kindness, you just don't understand it.
Alright, weird spooky story time, but I'm reading it off my laptop. Say hi to Brew. When I was a kid, I think we had a mimic in our house. Back then, I didn't know what a mimic was, so I just thought the house was haunted. But now that I see people talk about them on TikTok, I'm almost positive that's what it was. I'm going to say my name is Roger on here because I don't want anyone to know it's me, even though I don't live in the Santa Cruz area. You just never know. When I was about 8, my mom and dad and my brother and I lived in this house for about 3 years before my parents bought their own place. All of us would hear it, but it would only sound like my mom. It would do things like call us from the kitchen, and when we went in there, no one would be there. We would call for her and she would come out of the bedroom or something like that and ask what we needed. And when we told her she called us into the kitchen, she would say she never called us and that she hadn't even been in the kitchen. Both my parents worked, so after school we had a babysitter that picked us up and stayed with us until around 6 when my parents got home. One time when my brother and I were in our room, we had the door shut while we were playing and the babysitter was in the living room watching TV or something. We started hearing this light knocking on the door, and then we heard my mom's voice say, "Roger, open the door." It didn't sound normal though. Like it was her voice, but it was kind of off, like it was trying too hard. I said, "What?" Even though it sounded weird to me, but it didn't say anything other than it started to knock again, but faster, and said, "Roger, open the door for mommy." That freaked me out. She never called herself mommy to me, and she never knocked like that. She would always just knock and walk in at the same time. My brother and I didn't say anything, and then it was like it got mad. It started scratching the door and said, "Roger, open the door." I yelled back, "Why don't you just open it?" It did a few more times, then suddenly stopped, and it went completely quiet. We were both too scared to go to the door. Finally, my brother went since he was older, and when he opened it, there was nothing there. He went down the hall and the babysitter was still on the couch watching TV. He asked her if she was trying to scare us, and she looked confused and said, "What are you talking about?" We told her what happened and just said maybe it was the TV making weird sounds. But the look on her face made me think she was just trying to make us feel better. To this day, I know it wasn't the TV. Something was in that house. It only wanted to sound like my mom. I'm pretty sure it was a mimic in that house. When we moved, we didn't hear anything like that again. That definitely sounds like a classic mimic situation, especially because it only sounded like your mom. It didn't mimic anyone else. And then when you guys moved out of that rental and bought your own home, nothing ever happened again. So it's like it stayed with the house. I don't know, that one's really creepy, and I'm loving that I'm getting these like mimic stories now. They're so good. If anyone else has had a situation like this or know of a story like this, let me know in the comments or send it my way.
What is one unsolved murder case that is just next level horrifying and bone chilling to you? I'll go first. Mine is the mysterious death of Norah Fuller. She was a 16-year-old girl who responded to a newspaper ad for a nanny job that she desperately wanted. The man who placed this ad is only known as John Bennett, and so she meets this man at what he said was his house. But this address actually just led back to a vacant lot. No house ever existed there. Her body would eventually be found in an abandoned building that was mysteriously rented a few days prior to her going missing. The house only contained one cheap bed and one chair, which was also rented right before she disappeared, all presumably by this same man. Not a lot about this case is known, but what details we do have are so disturbing that they will keep you up at night. So let's talk about it. This is 16-year-old Norah Fuller. In 1902, she lived with her mom and younger siblings in San Francisco, California. The entire past year had not been great to the Fuller family, as Norah's mom had left her second husband. This left the family with no stable source of income, and some of that financial responsibility ultimately fell on Norah, who was taken out of school to go and find a job. Finding a job didn't take long for her though, because in early January of 1902, Norah found an ad in the newspaper for a nanny position. It was placed by a man named John Bennett, and he was looking for a nanny money for his baby. So on January 11th, 1902, Norah reached out to him, and John Bennett asked her to meet him at this local restaurant called the Popular Restaurant. Norah left her home that evening really excited to finally have some full-time work, but little did anyone know that this would be the very last time that she would ever be seen alive. A few hours go by, and Norah actually called her mom to tell her that the interview went great and that John Bennett wanted her to start right away. So instead of going to the restaurant, she was actually at his home. Norah told her mom the address, which was 1500 Geary Street. Her mom felt really off about this whole situation. She told Norah to just come home and that she could start at a later date, which annoyed Norah. Ultimately, though, Norah agreed and told her mom that she was on her way home. But hours came and went, and she never showed up. Not long after, her mom reported her missing and gave the police the address to John Bennett's house. But when police showed up to check on them, what they found was shocking, because sitting at 1500 Geary Street was literally just a vacant lot. There was no house there. So this was an immediate red flag to Norah's mom, but sadly, the police didn't really take this case seriously at first. They did a light search for her, but I guess one of Norah's friends had recently run away. So they told Norah's family and the public that Norah must have just ran away too. Meanwhile, her mom was saying no, Norah would never do that, and she was more than likely kidnapped by this John Bennett guy. So a month goes by with radio silence from Norah. Police eventually went to the Popular Restaurant and spoke with the owner, since Norah was supposed to have gone there the night she disappeared. The owner told them some pretty disturbing things though. He said that there was a man there that night that was waiting for a young girl, presumably Norah. But this wasn't just some random man. The man who police suspect was John Bennett was actually a regular at this restaurant, and he had been for the past 15 years. They didn't know his real name. They only ever called him Tenderloin because he was obsessed with steak tenderloins and would always order that. But the owner said that he talked to this regular at around 5:30 that night, and the man told them that he was expecting a young girl, so if she showed up, to send her to his table. The girl never showed up though, which made this man super irritable to where he was pacing up and down the sidewalk until he eventually left. What set off alarm bells though was that since this man had been coming to this restaurant for the past 15 years, the staff there knew him pretty well, and one thing was for sure: he had no wife and no kids, and he would sometimes pretend to be a minister. The owner said that he knows that this man had no good intentions with Norah had they actually met up. Because they physically saw this man, they were able to give police a description of a possible suspect. He was around 40 years old, 5'9", weighed about 170 pounds, was very well dressed, and had a brown mustache. So although this was super helpful, Norah was still nowhere to be found, and this is when authorities started taking the case a bit more seriously. Nothing would really happen though for another month. So on February 8th, 1902, the landlord for 2211 Sutter Street had sent police to the house to conduct a welfare check. The house had been rented 3 days before Norah's disappearance by a man who said his name was C.B. Hawkins. He wanted to rent 2211 Sutter Street, but he told the landlord that he had no references to give because he was from out of town. But the man was dressed extremely well, and he offered to pay the entire first month's rent up front. So the landlord agreed and gave him the keys to the house. On the contract, he again signed his name as C.B. Hawkins. So bringing it back to February 8th, it was now a new month, yet Mr. C.B. Hawkins had not paid the rent, and when the landlord went to knock on the door, he wasn't getting any answers. So he decided to send the police as something just felt off. And when authorities entered the house, they found a really eerie scene. It was like the house had sat untouched for a really long time. Dust and cobwebs were everywhere, and there was almost no furniture in the house, except for the bedroom. There was no source of heat or light, as the gas was never connected, and there was no food in the house either. So as police made their way to the bedroom, they saw a girl lying on the bed under a bunch of blankets. At first, it looked like she was sleeping, but as they peeled back the blankets, they found that this was actually Norah Fuller, and she was deceased. She'd been covered up to her neck in quilts, and the bed she was laying on was really small and cheap. Other than that, there was only one chair in the entire house, which was positioned to look at the bed. Lying on the bedroom floor was Norah's purse and her clothes, and a lot of letters addressed to a Mrs. C.B. Hawkins at 2211 Sutter Street. It was clear that Norah had been dead for some time before being found, and she was completely nude. Authorities found 2 black marks on her throat, one on each side of her larynx, and her cause of death was ruled as strangulation. Afterwards, she'd been horrifically assaulted, her body badly mutilated. The medical examiner said that it was clear just by looking at her that she had been unmistakably violated. No drugs were found in her system, although it could have been possible that she ingested some alcohol before death, and she was found to have eaten an apple about 2 hours before she died. What's really sad is that Norah's little brother was brought in to identify her, which he did, but he said that Norah had her unmistakable ribbon tied around her neck, which he fastened for her on the day day she went missing. So now that it was very clear that this was not a runaway case, police started processing the scene and trying to track down John Bennett, or this C.B. Hawkins guy. They started with the mail that was all over the floor in the abandoned house. All of it was junk mail except for one circular letter addressed to Mrs. C.B. Hawkins. It was postmarked 10 days after Norah went missing, yet it was opened and put inside of Norah's jacket. There were also torn pieces of the Denver Post all over the bedroom floor, dated 2 days before Norah disappeared. There was also an empty bottle of whiskey and the butt end of a cigar, and I'm not sure if this is because this happened in 1902, but no DNA was able to be taken from either of those items. Authorities started asking the public for help, which actually provided some helpful information. So the owner of a local furniture store nearby came forward and said that he actually met C.B. Hawkins, and he fulfilled an unusual request for him. C.B. was dressed super well in expensive clothing, which stood out to the store owner. He asked the owner for the cheapest bed he had and a plain chair, along with some quilts. The same quilts that Norah would later be found wrapped up in up to her neck. C.B. demanded that this be delivered that night or not at all, which they agreed to. And again, he signed the furniture order as C.B. Hawkins, just like the lease agreement at 2211 Sutter Street. This all happened on January 9th, 1902, so 2 days before Norah disappeared. So that night, a young delivery boy from the furniture store showed up to 2211 Sutter Street, as per his specific request. The house was really dark as C.B. never had the power turned on. This made the delivery a little bit difficult, so he asked C.B. if he could turn the lights on, which kind of spooked him a little bit. C.B. instead said to just leave the furniture outside and he would bring it in himself, which was weird, but that's what he did. Now that authorities had some sort of written trail for this guy, they decided to compare the handwriting from not just the furniture store and the lease contract, but also to the nanny ad posted in the newspaper, which Norah responded to, and it came back that all 3 signatures were a match. So not only was C.B. Hawkins a fake name, but so was John Bennett, and in reality, they were the same person. So because of this, authorities thought that it wouldn't be long until they would track this guy down, but that was not the case. Whoever killed Norah has never been found, and to this day, her murder remains unsolved. And although we don't know what happened to her or who was responsible, there are a few theories and suspects. So theory number 1 was that Norah possibly knew her killer, and this was backed up by one of her closest friends, Madge. Madge insisted that Norah's killer was this rich older man named Bennett who Norah had secretly been dating. I guess Norah had recently been sneaking out and going to hang out with this man behind her mom's back, so it was very secretive and no one really knew. Madge said that Norah really seemed to like Bennett a lot, and she thinks that the ad in the newspaper was actually just a trick to be able to sneak out and go see him. Her reasoning was that the ad specifically asked for a white nanny, which was odd and didn't need to be said. So either this ad was placed by an outsider not from California, or it was like a secret code for Norah by this John Bennett guy. Some people agree with this theory because of the way Norah was found. She was found wrapped up in quilts and tucked into the bed like she was sleeping, not just dumped somewhere. Maybe her killer felt bad and had some remorse after the fact. One thing was super clear though, and that was that the Sutter Street house had been clearly rented and staged for her murder. The killer very meticulously planned every single detail of Norah's murder, which is terrifying. Theory number 2 is that Norah didn't know her killer and that the ad in the newspaper was a ruse to lure a young girl to her death. The only suspect that police ever had was a local man named Charles B. Hadley. Charles was an accountant for the San Francisco Examiner, and he apparently lived with his girlfriend in town. When police went to his house, Charles was nowhere to be found, but his girlfriend was there, and she told authorities that Charles had actually disappeared the morning Norah's body was found. She said it was really weird because every morning Charles would go into the bathroom and read a newspaper on the toilet. The morning that Norah's body was found, Charles had just up and vanished, but when his girlfriend checked the bathroom, in the toilet was his newspaper, and in that newspaper was an article about Norah's disappearance. She thinks that he was probably responsible somehow and just freaked out and took off. She thinks he was involved because shortly after Norah disappeared, she was doing Charles's laundry and found blood all over his clothes. At that point, she didn't know where the blood came from or anything about Norah at all, so she burned all the clothes. And the one final piece of evidence that kind of puts the nail in the coffin is what Charles used to obsessively eat. Any guesses? Steak tenderloin, just like the regular at the restaurant. His girlfriend gave police a photo of Charles B. Hadley, and usually he was clean shaven, but his girlfriend said that in the days before all of this happened, he bought a fake brown mustache and would wear it all over town. So police took this photo and altered it to have a brown mustache, and then they showed it to everyone this mysterious man interacted with. So the restaurant owner, the landlord for 2211 Sutter Street, and the furniture store store owner and the delivery boy. And shockingly, they all agreed that this was the mystery man. Either John Bennett or C.B. Hawkins, whatever fake name he gave, this was all the same man. I guess it sort of makes sense if his name was Charles B. Hadley to go by C.B. Hawkins. But police began digging into Charles's past, and they found that he had family in Chicago, but also that Charles B. Hadley wasn't even his real name. His name was actually Charlie Start, and Charlie was known to have weird interactions in his past with other 16-year-old girls just like Norah. His face was blasted everywhere, and police began another massive manhunt for him. But to this day, he has never been found. So he's never been charged, but to a lot of people, and honestly myself included, it really seems like he was responsible for this crime. Some think that he ran off and lived out the rest of his life under a new identity, while others think that he killed himself not long after being discovered. Either way, he was never found, and it's now been 123 years. Yet whatever really happened to Norah that night and why remains a mystery.
Ronald Gene Simmons was born on the 15th of July 1940 in Chicago, Illinois. His father died in 1943, and then within a year his mum Loretta remarried a man named William, and the family moved to Little Rock. Ronald would eventually drop out of school and join the US Navy, where he met Rebecca at his first base in Washington, and the two got married in July 1960. He later transferred to the US Air Force, serving during the Vietnam War, and then he retired in November 1979. After retirement, the family lived in New Mexico. Neighbours would report, though, that Ronald's behaviour was really inappropriate towards his 17-year-old daughter, often saying that they saw him kissing her excessively in public. She was rarely allowed outside unless she was accompanied by Ronald. The children were driven to and from the school bus every day. They were forbidden from church, and they were assigned chores immediately as soon as they got home. Classmates said that the children walked on eggshells around Ronald, but away from him they were friendly and warm and just normal kids. In 1981, Ronald's 17-year-old daughter Sheila went to the police in New Mexico reporting that she had been SA'd and that she was pregnant with her father's child. When the police investigated, officers arrived to arrest him, but the entire family had disappeared. What they didn't know was that Ronald had fled the entire family and moved back to Arkansas, and it was there that the family lived in two adjoining trailers with no indoor plumbing, trespassing signs all over the place. The children appeared to be clean and normal looking. They didn't draw any attention, even in their really small school. They just kind of floated by. Ronald ended up having a load of different low-paid jobs at various different things, but sometimes he would quit after being reported for sexual harassment. Sometimes he'd just quit because he just didn't like doing it, which is what happened at a mini mart that he worked at for about 18 months, and he quit in December 1987. Rebecca, his wife, had actually tried to leave him several times, and locals had noticed bruises on her, but she had no mobile phone, she had no email access, so nothing was ever reported because she couldn't ever do it. And on the 22nd of December in 1987, Ronald began what would become one of the worst family massacres in US history. He first unalived Rebecca and then his eldest son, Gene, by beating them with a crowbar, and he then unalived his 3-year-old granddaughter, Barbara, and he buried the three of them in a pit that he had actually previously got his children to dig. He waited for the rest of the children to arrive home for their Christmas break. He separated each of them by saying that he was going to give them all a present. He then unalived 17-year-old Loretta, 14-year-old Eddie, 11-year-old Marianne, and 8-year-old Becky. He strangled them one by one and disposed of their bodies in a cesspit. On the 26th of December, so Boxing Day, more family members arrived to celebrate Christmas with them. He unalived his son Billy and Billy's wife by shooting them. He then drowned their baby and placed the infant's body in the boot of the car. He then went on to unalive his daughter Sheila, her husband Dennis, the child that he fathered with Sheila, and his grandson Michael. When finished, Ronald calmly drove to Sears, which is just a shop in America, and he collected the Christmas presents that he'd ordered, and then he stopped off at a drink at a local bar. And on the 28th of December, he purchased another firearm from a Walmart, and he decided that his next victim was going to be a former co-worker that he had who had rejected him coming on to her, basically. He then unalived another former employee and wounded another person, as well as killing a stranger who just happened to be there as well. He then took a hostage and got them to call the police while they were at point. When officers arrived, Ronald, who was now 47 years old at this point, surrendered without any hesitation, and he told them, "I've done what I wanted to do and now it's all over. I've gotten everybody who hurt me." He would ultimately be sentenced to the death penalty, and he was executed by lethal injection on the 25th of June in 1990, and he refused all visitors. He didn't even want lawyers or anything there.
A woman's 2 previous husbands had passed away under suspicious circumstances. Now, was this a complete accident, or did she have something to do with this? Let me know at the end of the story what you believe, if she was involved, but she claims she's completely innocent. Dorian Lanier is from North Carolina, and when he was very young, he joined the Air Force, and eventually he met his first wife, Beth, and they had 2 children together. Dorian inherited a farm from his grandfather, which was a turkey farm, and he built a home on there for his wife and 2 kids. But unfortunately, after 25 years of marriage, him and his wife had grown apart and they divorced. Dorian eventually ran into an old friend named Pamela Williams. She had been married previously twice, was raising her son Dustin on her own, but she did get married to a 3rd husband named Johnny in 1989. But on September 4th, 1991, Johnny had passed away under suspicious circumstances. Apparently, he was out checking the crab pots when all of a sudden he somehow got disoriented and fell into the water and ended up drowning. And this was only about 3 feet of water. Pam and Dorian ended up getting married in 1993, but by November of 1997, Dorian's health started to deteriorate. Pam had found him in his bedroom. He was very pale. He had a yellowish tint to his skin, so he's immediately rushed to the hospital. So the doctors are running all types of tests on him. He's, being coherent. He's talking to his family saying, "I'm going to be okay." Then all of a sudden his health just declined, and the doctors kept trying to resuscitate him, but could not bring him back, and unfortunately he passed away. There was an autopsy performed on Dorian. They did see that he did have some liver problems, which would explain the yellowish color to his skin. They found he had an enlarged heart and fluid around his lungs, but could not conclude the cause of death. So after the toxicology report, they did find that he passed away from arsenic poisoning. According to the medical examiner, it appears that Dorian had arsenic in his body for quite a period of time, and this was a very painful death. So he believes this was a homicide, not an accidental poisoning or a self-harming. Pam was interviewed, and she claims that they had a very loving relationship and they had a wonderful marriage. But in September, he did have an accident with one of his bulldozers. Apparently, a tree limb had gotten into the cab and it pinned his leg up against the controls, and he really hurt his leg pretty badly. And then over the next several weeks, Dorian's health started to deteriorate, and he refused to go to the hospital. He believed if he could, cure his turkeys, that he could cure himself, and he just didn't want to go to the doctor, and Pam respected his wishes. They did search the Lanier home, and they did find empty packets of Nitro-3. Now, this is used for the turkeys to help them grow and is put through the water line. So it's very possible that this was a complete accident and he accidentally poisoned himself, because he did drink out of the hoses that were outside. So it's very possible he got the wrong hose and was drinking some of that arsenic. But they concluded that this arsenic was more concentrated and more powerful and potent than that was used on the farm. So someone intentionally was poisoning him. But they did find out that there was a woman named Allie that was staying on the farm from September till November, and that's when Dorian started getting sick. So they interviewed her, and she was adamant that she had nothing to do with this, but she was concerned about his health. And, Pam would not allow anybody to see him, not his family, not even allowed to talk to him. It's like she wanted everyone to be isolated from him. But they find Allie has no motive, no financial gain to poison him, so they ruled her out as a suspect. Investigators know that Pam's previous husband had passed away under suspicious circumstances as well. So they talked to Johnny's mother, and she claims that he was very sick before he had passed. He went to the hospital, and he had stroke-like symptoms, almost like what Dorian had. So they wanted to exhume his body to see if he had arsenic poisoning. But when they got his body out, he was so deteriorated because he'd been in the ground for about 6 years. They found small amounts of arsenic in his body, but that's very common because we all already have some in our bodies. So there was no red flags indicating that he had been poisoned. But it turns out that Pam did have a life insurance policy on him, which was about $25,000. And then she also had one on Dorian for about $90,000. 4 months after Dorian's passing, Pam had decided to sell some of Dorian's farm equipment and also part of his land. But some of the family was really suspicious about this, but other parts of the family realized maybe she's doing it because she's still got to make a living and pay the bills. Investigators find out that a year before Dorian's passing, his house had caught on fire and Pam was the only one at home. They believe she possibly had set this fire for financial gain because they were struggling. So the insurance company, they had no idea how this fire started. So they ended up getting $142,000. So they bought a mobile home to put behind the home and they were able to pay off all of their debts. In January of 1999, a grand jury had indicted Pam on first-degree homicide, but she was able to get out on bond. Pam ended up contacting the police stating that someone was harassing and stalking her and vandalizing her home, believed she had something to do with Dorian's homicide, even though she hasn't been to trial yet. But she had no photos, no evidence, or proof that anyone was doing this. They believe that she was trying to make it look like someone else had done this to Dorian. Pam ended up rejecting a plea deal of only about 3 years because she claims she is innocent and did not do this to Dorian, so she decided to take this to trial. So there's really no evidence tying Pam to this. It's all circumstantial. But the state believes that she did this for financial gain. But the defense's argument is that she already lives on the farm. So it's not like she's inheriting the farm from him. She already lives there. So what is she gaining? Also, they believe it's possible that Dorian did accidentally poison himself. So this gives you no reasonable doubt. But the jury did find her guilty and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. I guarantee she is regretting not taking that plea deal. Pam hopes to be exonerated because she claims she did not intentionally poison Dorian. Now, what do you believe? Do you believe this was an accident or did she deliberately do this? In my opinion, I'm kind of still up in the air because, it's very suspicious that her previous husband passed away under suspicious circumstances. Then that fire was started, which was very suspicious. They don't know how it started, and she was the only one home. And then Dorian had passed away with arsenic poisoning. I don't believe he did that to himself, and they said it was not strong enough from the arsenic on the farm for that to unalive him. So I really do believe, with all the evidence that I'm seeing, that she possibly pretty much did this, I believe, in my opinion. But it's still, there's not a lot of concrete evidence tying her to it. But the jury believed that she did it, and she will spend the rest of her life in prison, and I guarantee she is regretting not taking that plea deal, but she did not want to admit to something she did not do. So she really believes in her heart that she did not do it, but let's see. We'll see if they end up finding more evidence, but I highly doubt it. She'll probably spend the rest of her life in prison. But let me know what you guys thought of this story in the comments. Thanks for watching. I love you all. We'll see you in the next one, and please take care of yourselves.
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
Jean Hoover was 42 years old. She was a sweet, caring woman who worked as an X-ray technician, and in late 2002, she'd just separated from her husband Ernest after 20 years of being married. Ernest then moved back in with his parents and his brother Scott in St. Benedict, which was about 105 miles away. Their daughters, Vicky and Lizzie, as well as Vicky's own daughter Madison, were living with their mum. The family were meant to go to Jean's parents in Johnstone for Christmas, and this was their tradition, but this would be the first year, obviously, that Ernest wasn't going to be going as well. When it was getting late on Christmas Eve and they hadn't arrived yet, Jean's parents couldn't get hold of her, so they actually asked for a welfare check to be done pretty much straight away because they knew this was unlike her. The police said, though, that it was probably just bad traffic because of the holiday season and that they had to call again tomorrow if they didn't arrive, and then they would be able to follow up if they still needed it. But on Christmas morning, there was still no sign of Jean or the girls, so the police arrived to Jean and the girls' house. They noticed that the family car was still on the driveway and nobody was answering the door, which was obviously weird. The police then see a broken window pane into the garage, so he enters through the garage door, which was open, and that actually led through straight into the kitchen, which is where he found Jean's body lying on the floor, surrounded by her own blood. He immediately called for backup, and then he heard a baby cry from upstairs, so obviously he immediately went to investigate, which was when he found 9-month-old Madison in her mum's arms. Vicky had been unalived and Madison was crying but unharmed, despite the fact that she had actually been left for nearly 27 hours. Lizzie was in her bedroom. She was laid across her bed, also unalived. All of them had been unalived using the same weapon, and Lizzie's injuries were actually so close that she actually had a burn mark around her eye and on her hand from where she tried to grab the weapon off the attacker. Police also noticed that the phone line had been cut, so no one was able to call for help, even if they had the opportunity to do so. So this was very targeted attack, and it wasn't a random burglary to steal Christmas present kind of thing. For a little bit of context backstory, Lizzie and Vicky had actually accused their father Ernest of essaying them in that summer, and Ernest was due to stand trial in just a month's time. The police alleged that he had essayed both daughters for years and that this was actually the reason behind the separation, because as soon as Jean found out about it, she kicked him out straight away. Ernest wasn't allowed to go back to that family house due to his bail release conditions, and there was also a protection from abuse order obtained on behalf of Lizzie. Ernest was not allowed to contact any of the family members, he wasn't allowed to go near the home, and he wasn't actually allowed to hold any of those specific weapons. But on the 23rd of December, Ernest had been drinking with his brother Scott near their parents' home when Ernest said that he wanted to go and get his dog back, even though his dog had actually passed away months earlier, but his brother didn't know that. Scott did know that Ernest wasn't allowed to go back to that family house, but he agreed eventually after Ernest wore him down. They stopped off so that Ernest could get changed into some dark clothing, which is a very unusual thing to do, and then they made the 105-mile journey. It was about 4 a.m. when they arrived, and Scott parked about a block away. Ernest was obviously wearing his dark clothes, and he'd also put on a mask and 2 pairs of gloves. He was only gone for about 10 minutes when he ran out of the house and got into the car and said, "Drive, drive, drive," and we were never here. On the drive back, Ernest and Scott stopped several times so that Ernest could change his clothes, and he also left random little bits and pieces of his clothing in the woods every time they stopped, just to leave a nice little trail behind him. What Ernest had actually done that night was enter through the broken window pane in the garage door, and he unalived his ex-wife, 43-year-old Jean, 20-year-old Victoria, and 15-year-old Lizzie, obviously just leaving behind baby girl Madison. Scott and Ernest were both arrested after search warrants were obtained on the home and on the car. Scott pled guilty before his trial, and he also agreed to be a witness as well. It was said that he was very remorseful and very upset about what had happened, and that he told officers that Ernest had said to him that he would shoot Jean for divorcing him. Scott was then sentenced to 12 to 25 years in a state prison. Ernest was sentenced to death in 2004, and that is where he remains to this very day. In 2008, Bruce Pardo was 45 years old and recently divorced from Sylvia Ortega. They'd got married in 2006, but the marriage had really quickly fallen apart. Bruce was narcissistic and he was financially controlling, and he wouldn't help support the kids until it was court-ordered. But it is believed that Sylvia's discovery of Bruce's hidden child, who he had abandoned, is what actually had caused their marriage to fall apart. On the 8th of December in 2008, Bruce and Sylvia had reached a final divorce settlement, and it was said that during this entire thing, things were quite civil between the two of them. He managed to keep the house and the cars, and she got the diamond wedding ring, $10,000, and most of the furniture, and also their dog, Saki. Bruce was supposed to deliver a $10,000 cashier's check to her attorney by the 19th of December, but he didn't show up. Bruce said that he was still trying to come up with the money. He'd actually recently lost his job because he was putting in false hours, so kind of frauding the company that he worked for. So he didn't have a proper job anymore. He was just doing his volunteer work like he did every year, which was being an usher at his local midnight mass. But on the 24th of December, Bruce dined at Montrose Home Bakery, which he did all of the time. It wasn't uncommon for him to be there. The owner said that he was completely normal that day. They chatted as usual. He ordered his usual raspberry cheese Danish and a coffee, and this time he also got a turkey sandwich as well. He ate it while he was just looking out the window, looking at Christmas shoppers and stuff walking past. When he left, he shook the owner's hand and said goodbye and Merry Christmas to you and your family. The owner replied, smiling, and said, "Yeah, you too, have a good one," and Bruce smiled back at him. But it would be just under 11 hours later that Bruce, dressed up as Santa, would go to his ex-wife's parents' house where they were having their Christmas party, and he would commit an horrific crime. At 10 p.m. that night, Christmas Eve, Bruce left his house. He wished his neighbours who were on the street a Merry Christmas. They asked where he was going, and he said he was going to a Christmas party. Bruce actually, though, had 4 weapons and a flame-throwing device wrapped up to look like a present, and he was carrying them out with him. Whilst he was driving to his former in-laws' house, Joe and Alice Ortega, who were the parents, they were there with their children, James, Charles, Letitia, Alice and Sylvia, and all of the grandchildren. They were all just relaxing and playing party games. About 11:30 p.m, Bruce arrives and he knocks on the door. Obviously he is dressed in a Santa suit, so one of the little girls is who goes to the door. She's really excited. Obviously she's at a party and she hears this knock on the door, so she runs there. She opens it, she sees Santa, and she's like, oh my god, it's Santa. And the first thing that Santa did was pull out his weapon and wounded her on the side of the face. Bruce then enters the house and he opens fire on everybody there. He then took out the flamethrower that he had brought, and everything actually went up into flames way quicker than he was expecting it to. The wounded little girl and her mum, Letitia, managed to escape through the door, and they ran down the street and they were trying to get somebody desperately to call 911. The 911 tips are horrendous to listen to. Letitia is Bruce's ex-sister-in-law. Obviously, she's one of the siblings that was at the party, and she can be heard saying, it's all of my family, there's 25 to 30 people, and I have a feeling I know who it is. And she identifies this mystery person as Bruce. Because the fire took off so quickly, the bodies that were left inside the house were so badly burnt that investigators had to use dental records to be able to identify them. The 9 unalived victims were Joseph Ortega, who was 79, and his wife Alicia, who was 70, Sylvia, obviously the ex-wife, who was 43, Charles, who was 50, and his wife Cherie, who was 45, James, who was 52, and his wife Teresa, who was 52 as well, and Alicia, who was 46, and her son Michael, who was only 17 years old. This was not a spontaneous attack. Bruce had started planning this in the summer before this. So he'd started buying weapons and equipment, and then he ordered a custom-made, extra-large Santa Claus suit from a local seamstress, and he said he needed it to be extra large so that he could be extra jolly while he was wearing it. The seamstress recognised this when it was on the news, and she could not believe that the reason he asked for it extra large was so that he could keep weapons in it. In early December, Bruce had finished the last part of his plan before going through with it, which was getting some getaway cars and booking a flight to Illinois. But because the fire took off way quicker than he thought it was going to, he actually ended up suffering from third-degree burns, and some of the Santa suit that he was wearing actually melted onto his own skin. So then after the attack, because he was injured, he'd got into his getaway car, he drove 40 miles away to his brother's house, he broke in, and he actually took his own life while he was there. So Bruce was the 10th victim of this attack. I say victim, he wasn't the victim. Police then found the rest of the Santa suit in one of the rental cars which he'd hired, and it actually had a booby trap on it. So if somebody had picked it up to try and move it, then it would have gone up in flames. It did actually do this as well, but luckily no one was hurt, which is actually a miracle. Bruce also had $17,000 in cash strapped onto him, as well as an airline ticket. He cling filmed it onto himself. So he was going to commit this crime and then he was going to flee, obviously not anticipating what was going to happen and that he was going to injure himself and that he was going to take his own life. The 9 members of the Ortega family are all buried next to each other in a local cemetery close to their parents' home. Alexis Valdez was born on the 23rd of February in 1995. He was a young man whose life just seemed to be triggered by instability and lack of ambition. In June 2013, he'd moved into his Aunt Mary's house in Chicago with her and her boyfriend, who was Sylvester Diaz Hernandez. Sylvester was described by his friends and family as hardworking, jovial and caring, and he deeply valued his family and would spend as much time with them as he possibly could. He was originally from Mexico and he moved to Chicago when he was 17, where he started a new life. He built friendships, he eventually met his first wife, they went on to have 2 children together, and although they got divorced, they maintained a really amicable co-parenting relationship. Sylvester was absolutely dedicated to his children. He wanted to give them a stable life, even though him and the mum were no longer together. Over time, he then began a new relationship with Mary, who had 4 children of her own. Sylvester embraced this entire situation, and together they built a big blended family, and everybody was just really happy. Alexis was able to stay at his aunt's house on the condition that he went to school, he worked a part-time job, and he contributed to the household expenses. Alexis did start doing this and things were going really well at first, but when he stopped doing all of these responsibilities that he was supposed to be doing, it caused a lot of tension in the household and a lot of arguments started. By December 2013, Mary and Sylvester had reached their absolute limit with this boy, and they told him that he had to move out, and Alexis was furious about this decision. So on Christmas Eve, he decided that he wanted to give his Aunt Mary a Christmas present that she would never forget. Mary was actually at a Christmas party on that Christmas Eve, and Sylvester was away visiting some family for the day. So Alexis was just at home. He was drinking a lot. He was getting angrier and angrier as the day had gone on about the fact that they'd told him that he had to move out. So he was furious. He'd agreed to do it, but the more that he thought about it, the angrier and angrier he was getting. So when Sylvester got home from visiting family that day, he came into the house and he saw that Alexis had just been in doing nothing and just drinking all of the beer that was in the house. So as Sylvester was kind of tidying things up and just putting the house back in order, Alexis struck him in the head repeatedly with a hammer. Sylvester was pretty much immediately unalived, and Alexis went on to decapitate and dismember the body with loud music playing and all of the curtains closed. His initial plan, though, was to actually place Sylvester's head on the pillow in Mary's bed, and then when she came in and saw it, he was then going to attack her. But she didn't actually get home until way later than Alexis was expecting to. So because he was just at home, he was waiting for her, he was again getting more and more annoyed about the fact that she wasn't getting home yet. So instead of waiting any longer, he just decided to call 911 and he reported a person who had passed away. The 911 caller asked if he could perform CPR, and Alexis replied to say no, because there's no head. When the police arrived on the scene, prosecutors said that they found Alexis pretty much straight away just waiting outside. He was covered in blood and he admitted to what he had done. Alexis was taken into custody outside the apartment building, and the murder weapon was recovered as well pretty much straight away. On the 27th of December in 2013, police said in a statement that Alexis Valdez was being charged with 1 count of first-degree murder. In 2017, Alexis was sentenced to 33 years in prison, and Sylvester's 17-year-old daughter Selena said, "My father was a good person. He never did anything to anyone. He was a good father. He did what he could for me and my brother. He did the best to provide for us after me and my brother lost our mother." On the 18th of December in 1996, a groundskeeper at Pleasant Valley Memorial Park Cemetery in Annandale, Virginia, made a really disturbing discovery. In a section of the cemetery that was reserved for infant graves, but not near a specific headstone, he found the body of an elderly woman. Near her was a clear plastic sheet, and on that sheet sat a small Christmas tree decorated with gold baubles and red ribbons, and because no one knew who she was, she just became known as the Christmas Tree Lady. The woman was wearing headphones that were connected to a little portable tape player, and inside was a recording of Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner performing their 2,000-year-old man routine. Investigators would ultimately decide that she had taken her own life by drinking brandy, swallowing Valium, and placing a plastic bag over her head and sealing it with tape. Her blood alcohol level was recorded at 0.14. Nearby was a handwritten note that was signed by Jane Doe, and it said, "Deceased by own hand, prefer no autopsy. Please order cremation with funds provided. Thank you, Jane Doe." And she'd also left some money. She'd left $52 in total. It said that $1 was for the coroner, $1 was for the cemetery, and the rest was to pay for the cremation. And for more than 25 years, her identity was a complete mystery. But in May of 2022, the woman was finally identified, and her name was Joyce Meyer, and she was 69 years old when she passed away. She was born in 1927. She was the oldest of 5 children, and she grew up on a farm outside of Davenport, Iowa. She'd attended Iowa State University and then moved to Los Angeles, where she lived with her aunt, and she worked for 17 magazine, which is so cool. In the 50s, she left her job to teach 2nd grade at a Catholic school, despite having no formal background in education at all. She was placed in charge of 60 students and quickly found that she was really overwhelmed in this new position that she got herself. Around this time, she'd started seeing a psychiatrist, and those treatments slowly alienated her away from her family. At one point, she got into a massive confrontation with her mum, accusing her of being abusive and being a bad parent. Joyce later then moved to Seattle, and she secretly got married to a man called James. They didn't have any children, and they got divorced a few years later. And then she moved into a trailer park in Tucson, Arizona. Her siblings did try to find her again after she kind of went off the grid. They thought that she'd maybe joined a cult, but The last known place that she was staying at was abandoned when one of the siblings went to go and check it out. As DNA testing got so much better over the years, that is why she was eventually able to be matched to a family member and confirmed to be Joyce Mayer. It was a very special place in hell for the man involved in this case. Zazelle Preston was 26 years old and married to William Wallace, who was 30 years old. They were living together in Anaheim in California. They'd been married for just a few weeks, and Zazelle had just given birth to a baby boy. She actually also had 2 girls of her own from a previous relationship who were aged 3 and 8. Around this time too, Zazelle had started taking a college course so that she could one day become a domestic violence counsellor. She felt like she had a calling to this job and it was just something that she was meant to do. She was also in a violent and abusive relationship. William had actually already spent time in jail because of what he had done in the past. After moving in together, after being in a relationship for a short time, William attacked Zazelle and beat her so badly that she was unrecognisable. She needed hospital treatment. She had bruises everywhere. She had clumps of hair missing, and these attacks just continued. In 2008, William attacked her when she was in the bathroom at one point. He had been drinking and he stumbled into the bathroom looking for an argument. She didn't respond, she didn't fight back, she didn't argue back, she did nothing. But he grabbed her by the hair and slammed her into the wall. She then fell to the floor and she was dragged by her hair through the bathroom into the bedroom. This was when he tried to strangle her and he beat her until she was unconscious. And even at the point that she was unconscious, he was still screaming at her and kicking off. Zazelle managed to wake up and escape from the apartment and found help from a stranger who actually rang the police, but by the time they got there, William had already gone and he came back the next morning. Zazelle called the police again. It was just very much a toxic relationship and she was just stuck in the cycle of it. William would plead guilty to a misdemeanor in a domestic violence charge and he was jailed for just 19 days. This was back in 2008, so he was literally just in and out of jail before you even could tell. September 2008, William was back in prison for 2 years on a substance charge, and during this time he said that he'd found God and he was a born-again Christian. During his sentence, Zazelle visited him weekly, so when he was released in October 2010, he moved back in as soon as he could. But on Christmas Eve in 2011, the couple had been at a Christmas party at one of the neighbours' houses. The children were at home and everything just seemed to be going really well until they got into an argument. So they left early and went home. When they got back home, neighbours heard them pretty much straight away get into a heated argument. And when neighbours looked out of the window a couple of minutes later, they saw William picking up what appeared to be a lifeless kind of body by the front gate. Zazelle had actually tried to escape at that moment, but William had caught her and dragged her back in. But the neighbour just thought that it was a drunk partygoer and they were just getting help from their partner taking them back inside. They did not realise what was actually going on, but if they did, things would have been very different. The couple continued to argue at this point and it turned from verbal to physical. The neighbours were really used to all of the shouting though. They were used to hearing these arguments all the time, so they didn't do anything. They didn't think to ring the police. It was just normal. Zazelle's 8-year-old daughter woke up because she heard a beating happening, obviously. Zazelle was screaming for him to stop, but she got pushed into a glass table and obviously it shattered and the shards of glass just went everywhere, all over Zazelle. William got her 8-year-old daughter to try and clean her up and to help her, but because it was such a mess, everywhere in the house was such a mess and there was blood everywhere, William dunked Zazelle in the bath in the hopes that it would just clean everything off and it would kind of like snap her out of being a little bit unconscious. He then picks her up out of the bath, but because she's wet and she's covered in blood, he drops her and she hits her head on the toilet bowl. It was said that she then made a strange gurgling noise and then she went silent. And it was at this point that Zazelle had lost her life. William then picked her up and dragged her onto the bed. The 8-year-old girl went back to bed as well, and that was kind of how the night ended. During the night, remembering the fact that she had a 7-week-old baby, the baby wakes up in the night wanting a night feed, and William Wallace picks up the baby and puts him on Zazelle's chest so that the baby could feed, even though she had passed away. I can't even think about that part too much, to be honest. Then, on Christmas Day, William dragged his wife's body from the bedroom. He put her on the living room sofa, put some sunglasses on, propped her up as though she was still alive, and then got the children to open the Christmas presents and just said that Mummy had gotten drunk and ruined Christmas. Instead of calling first responders for a really long time, just started ringing family members. He rang Zazel's mum and said that he hadn't had time to call for anybody to come round, and said we'd got into an argument, I'd tossed her around a bit, and basically he was just wasting a hell of a lot of time. Then at 9:30 a.m. he did eventually call first responders. They arrived, they saw blood everywhere, they saw holes punched in the walls, a door that was off the hinges, and it didn't take long for police to realise what had happened. The autopsy would ultimately show that it was a brain hemorrhage that Zazel had passed away from. William Wallace was arrested that day but remained in custody on a $1 million bail for 9 years as he awaited his trial, because they actually wanted the 8-year-old daughter to be a little bit older so that she could give a reliable account of what had happened, as well as other factors, but that was one of the main ones. So Zazel's daughter, who was now 18 years old at this time, testified that she remembered her mother's body being cold on Christmas morning, but that also she saw her mum hit her head on the toilet bowl after William had dropped her, so she did confirm that that is what happened. After a 9-year wait, William still stuck to the story of Zazel drunkenly falling, hitting her head, and she'd thrown herself onto the glass table because she was drunk and blah blah blah. But on the 6th of June in 2021, William Wallace was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison, but with the credit of the 9 years that he'd already served.
The Zodiac Killer has been identified. Again. So I've gotten some DMs, emails, and comments in the videos saying, hey, did you hear? The Zodiac Killer, yeah, he's been identified. And guess what? He's also the Black Dahlia Killer. And I said, what? The Black Dahlia murder, aka Elizabeth Short, who was murdered very brutally in 1947. She was murdered in LA and her body was found in pieces. There has been just a humongous list of suspects over the years. Armchair detectives, amateur sleuths, actual detectives, etc., they all have their opinions on who killed her. And then, of course, in 1968 to 1969, we have our dear old enemy, the Zodiac Killer, who murdered at least 5 people over the course of that time span. And he, of course, sent all of those weird letters and coded messages to the police, to the newspapers. You know, basically, it's like, ha ha ha, you're never gonna catch me, copper. And then over the years, we have had different code breakers say they figured out his coded messages. Every year, we get a new Zodiac Killer. One time it was some guy's grandpa. Another time it was some police officer. It's some guy named Fred or Bill or something. Here's a photo of him in glasses. He must have been the Zodiac Killer. But now, the big reveal. An amateur sleuth named Alex Baber says he has uncovered the identity of both killers. And in fact, they are one in the same. A man named Marvin Margolis, who was in fact a former acquaintance of Elizabeth Short. Marvin here also has medical experience because they said whoever killed the Black Dahlia had to have some medical expertise. He was a Navy medic in World War II. But he was cleared early on as a suspect in the Black Dahlia killings. Well, he apparently would later move to Northern California where the Zodiac killed. I'm going to read this. So it says, Margolis' possible connections to the Zodiac killings became downright eerie once Baber uncovered newspaper accounts from the Dahlia killing describing a man frantically driving around Compton motels looking for a room with a bathtub the night before the murders started. One of the hotels he was staying at was called the Zodiac. He apparently also owned a Japanese bayonet, which would, I guess, match the description of the knife wounds from some of the Zodiac killings. This amateur sleuth also says he uncovered a drawing that Marvin Margolis drew about a year before his death in 1993. It was a drawing titled Elizabeth and was just a drawing of a woman from the top half up, with marks on her body similar to Elizabeth Short. And quite honestly, you can't deny that that's very, very similar. But you can also find a million guys who look like this, wearing glasses, and say, oh, he's the Zodiac. So I looked it up. Marvin Margolis was born in 1925, which makes him 22 years old at the time of Elizabeth Short's murder. And when the first known confirmed Zodiac killing happened in 1968, he's 43 years old. The descriptions of the Zodiac from many witnesses, some say he was a late teen to mid-20s. Others say he was in his mid-20s to his mid-30s. Still significantly younger than what Marvin Margolis was at the time the Zodiac killing started. But also, those are just guesses from people who saw him. That's not an exact science. You don't look at a person in a dark area and go, oh yeah, he's definitely 26 years old. And from what I understand, he maintains, pretty much younger looks for his age. But is he the Zodiac Killer and the Black Dahlia Killer? Dudes, I don't know. Bros, I'm tired. I'm tired of all the Zodiac stuff. This Alex person says, as far as he's considered, these cases are both closed. It does need to be stated that the authorities have not said that. There is very few articles published about this breakthrough. I feel like at this point, we get a new suspect every year, and it loses credibility every single time. I have fallen for it before. I don't think we're ever going to know truly the identity of the Zodiac Killer. We're just not going to. And unfortunately, we're never going to know who truly killed Elizabeth Short. I just don't think it's possible at this point. But keep sleuthing, I guess. He was attending a New Year's party, and then seemingly out of nowhere, he vanished. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Vernon Jones. Viewer discretion is advised. Vernon Kent Jones was born in May of 1969, and he was born and raised in North Carolina. Vernon would end up attending the University of North Carolina, where he graduated. After graduation, he wanted to pursue his acting career. He would move from North Carolina to New York City. On January 1st, 1993, Vernon would be attending a New Year's party in this apartment building here, which is on the Lower East Side in Manhattan. According to witnesses, which unfortunately in this case is not exactly the most reliable thing, Vernon was, having a decent time at the party, but he began to feel sick. And he had attended the party with 3 of his friends. So around that time, 2 of the friends would end up leaving the apartment, but the 2 friends went right down the road to go get some paper towels to help clean up. This would have been a back and forth trip of maybe 5 minutes total. The 3rd friend allegedly stayed inside the apartment. But when the 2 other friends got back to the apartment where the party was at, Vernon was gone. From what I understand, the 2 friends did not see Vernon leaving the apartment when they were getting back inside. The 3rd friend who had stayed behind said that he was actually in one of the bedrooms and he thinks he heard a door slam, and when he went back out to the rest of the apartment, Vernon was gone. He says he assumes that Vernon just went outside to get some fresh air because he was feeling sick. 2 of the friends would state that at one point they went out looking for Vernon, but the 3rd friend said that never happened, that neither of the 3 of them went out looking for him. Friends say they just assumed that he somehow got back to his apartment. I plug this into Google to see, from the apartment the party was at to where he lived, it's not a short walk. It's like several blocks away. He would have had to take public transportation. But it doesn't sound like anyone remembers picking him up or anything like that. But also with it being New Year's and it's New York City, would they even remember? Eventually, when his family in North Carolina found out that he was missing, they would go to New York themselves. They looked into his apartment. That's where they found his wallet and his ID. So another issue is they don't know if Vernon actually had those with him at the party, and then he actually did get back home and then left again without those items, or if he had left them behind from the get-go and never had them with him that night. He would have needed those things in order to get public transportation. And again, there are no witnesses who saw him. His disappearance really didn't break headlines or anything. There's actually very little published about his case. But the fact of the matter is he is gone. He has not been seen since. it would have gotten to a point where someone would have recognized him. He would have had to have used his social security number at one point or tried to access his bank account at some point, but none of that has ever been touched. Vernon was in an apartment at a party, and then out of nowhere, he just poofed into thin air and was never seen again. Nobody recalls seeing him leave the apartment. No one recalls seeing him leave the apartment building. Did he truly leave on his own that night? Or did something else happen? Is foul play involved? They don't know for sure. In the years since, they have come up with these composite drawings to show what he may look like as an older individual. If alive today, he would be about 56 years old. He was 24 when he disappeared. Somebody somewhere out there knows the truth about what really happened to Vernon on that night in New York City. Someone out there, possibly watching this video right now, has the answers they all need and has the information to bring Vernon home. Perhaps that someone is you. If you have the information about this case, please call 1-800-490-2267. You can also call the New York Police Department at 646-610-6914.